Let's have a very quick discussion about all the remaining environmental factors, that is housing, ventilation, light, sound, radiation, and let's see what you need to know for your exam. First topic that we are going to take is housing and ventilation. Let us first talk about ventilation. If you talk about ventilation, how many types of ventilation do we have? We have something called as exhaust ventilation, or we can have a plenum ventilation. What do you mean by exhaust? The exhaust fan in the house. It throws in air outside or outside air inside? It throws the inside air, it throws outside. That's what the exhaust fan would do. What is the plenum ventilation? It will throw the out air coming inside. So what is the best type of ventilation? The best type of ventilation is always a mixed ventilation. So civic engineering people or people who are making designs, they will talk about cross ventilation. Beta, cross ventilation is basically used in civil engineering. So what we have to do in from medical point of view, we have a mixed ventilation, that is a mixture of the exhaust ventilation and a plenum ventilation. We already talked in the module in air that there should be 2 to 3 air changes to have a healthy and a good ventilation. Very important. Next in line, in the house, how should be the overcrowding? Should there be overcrowding? Of course, there should not be overcrowding. So as far as overcrowding is concerned, there are two basic criteria to call as overcrowding. One is a gender criteria, another is a space criteria. So what do you mean by the gender criteria? Gender criteria is any two people who are of opposite gender. So two persons of opposite gender, age more than 9 years, sharing a single room, that is technically called as overcrowding. So age more than 9 years, two persons of opposite gender, of course not husband and wife. Otherwise, everything will be overcrowding every time. So two persons of opposite gender, age more than 9 years, sharing a single room, that is called as overcrowding. What is the space criteria, bache? Space criteria is basically about the floor space. So if one person is living in a single room and the space is less than 70 square feet, the floor space is less than 70 square feet, that is called as overcrowding. If two people are sharing a single room, if it is less than 110 square feet, that is called as overcrowding. And then every person you keep on adding, you need 40 square feet per person. For everyone you keep on adding. So 3 people 150, 4 people 190, and so on. So this is the space criteria for overcrowding. Next in line is this. What do you see here? This is a house, right? Everybody needs a house. You have a house, I have a house. So how should our house be? We all want a beautiful house, right? So the house should be more than 15 meters away from the road. It should be more than 15 meters away from the road, first criteria. Second, the outside wall, the outer wall of our house should be more than 9 inches thick. The outer wall should be more than 9 inches thick. The roof should be a pakka roof. That is what is called as a pakka house. What is the difference between a kacha house and a pakka house? Please note that if the roof is cemented or has linter or it has iron and cement, if it is confirmed, like the roof is there, firm roof, that is called as a pakka house. Even if your walls are cemented and the roof is thatch roof or it is a temporary roof, that is not called as a pakka house. What is a pakka house? Where the roof is pakka, that means the roof has cement and iron into it. That is what we call as a pakka house. Fourth, the roof, again, important point, the roof should be more than 10 feet high. 10 feet high. You remember, like in old times, if you go to visit some castles, some palaces, big ones, they'll have very high roof. Why? Because it promotes ventilation actually. And the roofs which are less than 8 feet, it's not allowed. So roofs less than 8 feet are usually not allowed. Not usually, they are not allowed as per the public health norms. Allowed as per the public health norms. Ideally, the roof should be 10 feet or it could be anything more than 10 feet. Next is the house. Every house should have some rooms inside. There should be some rooms inside, right? So how many rooms should be there in a good house? Please note, a good house should have more than 2 or equal to 2 rooms. There should be 2 or more rooms, first thing. every room, if you talk, every room should have a door, it should have a window, common sense, right? So what is the size of the door? The door should be more than 1/5 of the floor area. 1/5 of the floor area is for the door, and the window should be again more than 1/5 of the floor area. If you combine them together, both the door and the window, they both should be combined total more than 2/5 of the floor area. 2/5 of the floor area if you combine the door and the window both. Next MCQ is that in the house, the window should be above from the ground. Common sense. If the window is very top, it is called as ventilator. If it is very low, it is again called as ventilator. So the window of the house or the room, the window should be more than 3 feet from the ground. More than 3 feet from the ground. Next point, from the house perspective. The house that we see should be away from the cattle or very near to the cattle. Please note that the house should be more than 25 meters away from the cattle. What about the water? Should the water be there inside the house or near the house? Of course, the water should be as close as possible, not more than 100 meters or 30-minute walk. It should not be more than 100 meters away, the water source. The water source should not be more than 100 meters away or 30 minutes walk. So that was most of your questions from housing and ventilation. Let's take on the topic number 2, that questions from lighting. Beta, first point is, how do you measure light? What are the units of light? If you talk about light, if there is a bulb, as you can see in the screen, in your device, there is a bulb. So how brightly the bulb is being lit up, that is going to talk about one thing. So that is at the source, how bright the source of the bulb is. It's very shiny or less shiny. Second point is, how is the flow of light? Second point is, you can also measure, or the flow of light could also determine how much light is there in the room. If you visit some photography shots or some studios, they'll have that light boxes in which the bulb is there and then there is a diffuser. So actually the diffuser is going to make the light as a uniform light. So one is a source of light, that how strong the bulb is inside that light box. And then there is a flow of light, and finally there is how much light is reaching the surface. That is another consideration, that how much light will reach the surface. That is point number 3. There is a fourth point, that if this is the surface, how much light is reached, that is point 3, and how much light will go back, that is point 4, that is how much is the re-emission of light. So if you visit some photography shops, they will say that, Bhaiya, do you want the photograph on matte finish or gloss finish? What is the difference between matte finish, gloss finish? Matte will be a rough surface, the re-emission will be less. So it will be more smoother light falling and absorption. And then there will be glossy finish. Glossy finish is like the light falling and it reflects back and you see very shiny things. So all these things are going to determine how the light is there in the room. The lighting of the room is determined by these 4 parameters. Let us learn what are the units of these 4 parameters. The first parameter is, what is the source of light? How bright is the source of light? That is, bache, called as luminous intensity. Don't forget this. This was asked in your very recent exam. Luminous intensity is going to measure the source of light, brightness of the source. Luminous intensity, it is measured in candela. So one candle, remember, one candle, how much light it can throw is candela. That is the brightness of the source. That is the luminous intensity. Second is the flow of light. The flow of light can be measured in luminous flux, flow in flux, flux in flow, flow in flux. Flux is measured by lumens. Very important for you to remember, because from public health point of view, we talk about lumens. So the light can be measured using the source, that is the candela, using the flow of light, that is the lumens of light. And third is the how much light reaches the surface. The surface light is measured in lux. Lux is not that soapy thing. Lux is the unit of light. So don't confuse with that soap lux. Lux is the how much light reaches the surface. It is the light reaching the surface that is called as illumination. If you forget lumens and if you forget lux, then you are in a big problem. Whatever it is, do not forget this. Please note, this is a 5 by 5 star MCQ topic, very frequently asked. So what is lumen? What is lux? That is okay that last 1 or 2 years they asked about the candela, about the luminous intensity, but very commonly they'll ask you about lumens and the lux. Last is how much light is re-emitted. If you can remember Lambert's. That is called as brightness illuminescence. Please note that brightness luminescence is different from luminous intensity. It is different from illumination or illuminescence. Brightness luminescence. That is measured in Lambert's. So I'll repeat for you again, beta. What is the brightness of the source? Brightness of the source. Brightness of the source is measured in candela. That's what we had done. F for flow, F for flux, F for flow, F for flux, and you add lumens. Surface light is lux and remitted light is Lambert's. Can you remember this? Lambert's. So these are the units of light. Now, if you understand the units of light, let us go ahead and talk about a reflection factor. What do you mean by reflection factor? Reflection factor is, let us say, a bulb is there inside the room. So if the bulb is there, how would it contribute to the room lighting? It's not only the source which is contributing. It is also the light which is reflected from the ceiling. The ceiling is the biggest reflection factor that we have. Ceiling will give you how much reflection factor? 70 to 80% lights are usually reflected back from the ceiling. Ceiling is the highest thing. Then is the wall. So ceiling. Next is the walls. The walls will also be reflecting back. The walls will also be reflecting back. Around 40 to 60% of the light is wall reflection. And then there is some furniture in the room. The furniture could be like, depending on how much furniture is, usually anything like 20 to 30% of the furniture of the lighting in the room is because of the reflection by the furnitures. If you remove the furniture, the light will be less. If you add furniture, light is more. So it is more enhanced by more glossy type of furnitures in the rooms. So if you just look at some cinematographic videos, they'll have some beautifully placed furniture because it actually adds to the lighting of the room. And last is the floor. The floor is the contributing the least, that is 10 to 20% of the light in the room is contributed by the floor. Remember, this can be MCQ that the ceiling is contributing maximum reflection factor. Next is about artificial lighting. So that's the God-made lighting, or that's the bulb lighting, whatever we have in the room. Let us talk about artificial lighting. Let's see, a very romantic looking lamp is there inside my room. So this romantic lamp is there, and there is a lampshade. If you go to Raja Maharaja time, some back time, king, queen time. So the king, queen time, they used to have beautiful chandeliers, and they used to have beautiful lampshades with all the covering. Even if you see old movies, they'll have that candles, and there will be a cover for that candle. So why do people cover it? Because there are two types of light. One light is called as direct light, which is directly coming from the source to downwards. So, or source to downwards, or even source to upwards. So one is a direct light. Another is a diffused or indirect light. So technically the light could be a direct light or it could be indirect light. When do we say direct light? When the more than 90% of the light is directly there on the surface and less than 10% is indirect. If less than 10% is indirect and more than 90% is direct, it is called as a direct artificial lighting. What do we call as a semi-direct? Semi-direct is when 60 to 70% light is direct, 30 to 40% light is still indirect. What is indirect lighting? Indirect lighting is when more than 90% is indirect and less than 10% will be direct. You also have something called as semi-indirect. What is a semi-indirect lighting? When 60 to 70% is indirect and remaining 30-40% is direct, that is semi-indirect. So you have direct lighting, semi-direct, semi-indirect, and a indirect lighting. We can also have a directly indirect lighting. Directly indirect lighting, where it is equal proportion. Usually directly indirect lighting are considered to be the best type of lighting because it is going to have an equilibrium. But all said and done, depending on the demand, if you are studying, You don't want anything which is indirect. For a studies, for focused work, you always want a direct light. And when you're just leisuring in the room, then you always want an indirect light. So indirect light is always soothing. There should not be any harmful or sharp shadows anywhere. That is what is a good lighting. So that was all that you need to remember about artificial lighting. Types of artificial lighting we can have as direct lighting or indirect lighting. Next is point number 4. What are the sources of light? What are the sources, like the modern day sources? Of course, earlier we used to have mashal, you can have candles, you can have lanterns, whatever we want. But the modern day sources, we can have a tungsten conventional bulb. So you have a tungsten filament bulb. The filament bulb will have some light and will have some heat, right? So usually it is said that the filament bulb will have only 5 to 10% of the light, and the remaining of the energy from the tungsten bulb is dissipated as heat. 90 to 95% goes off in heat. So there is a lot of energy wastage in the tungsten bulb. So of course we are thankful to Edison for inventing the light bulb, but all said and done, that is kind of more energy wastage rather than energy usage. Next in line, you have the CFLs. CFLs, that is the compact fluorescent lamp. So the compact fluorescent lamp, that is the CFL, they will have something around 20 to 25% light, and they will have 75 to 85% heat loss. Again, the CFL bulbs may get heated. And lastly, you have the best ones, that is the LED lights. LED is the light emitting diodes, and the light emitting diode types. So that is the LED bulb which has the highest light efficiencies. 70 to 75% is dissipated as the light. The energy can be used as light, and remaining only 25 to 30% goes off in heat, and they have a very long life. And that's why you have the Ujala scheme by the government of India. You know, Ujala scheme. What is the Ujala scheme for? It is launched by the government of India to promote LED bulb use, so that we can have national saving of the electricity and people can get more lighting in their houses. So based on all these understanding about direct, indirect light, about the sources, now I think you'll be able to understand what about is a good lighting or a well-lit room, and what is a daylight factor. But if you look at this pen inside the room and this pen outside the room in a bright sunny day, the shade of the pen will vary. So when our parents, grandparents, they used to go to buy a cloth in a shop, they used to look at the shade of the cloth inside the showroom and outside the showroom to compare. So that phenomena of comparing is what is a daylight factor. So daylight factor is the amount of illuminescence inside the room divided by the amount of illuminescence outside the room into 100. So it is actually a ratio of illumination inside and illumination outside, and you find the ratio. That is what we call as a daylight factor. Please note that any room in the house, if it has a daylight factor of less than 2, that is called as a dark room. Dark room. So it is not at all a well-lit room. For every room to have a good well-lit room, it should be more than 2. Usually it is said that in all the bedrooms or dining hall or any room, it should always be more than 8. More than 8 daylight factor is one which is very important for all the rooms except the kitchen. The kitchen should be more than 10. So more than 10 daylight factor is there for kitchen, bedroom, dining hall. All the basic rooms should be more than 8. Any room which is less than 2 is a dark room. Also, the permissible limits of lighting. Also, the permissible limits for lighting in a normal room. In a normal room, it should be more than 100 lux. It should be more than 100 lux. It is said that if the light in the room is more than 100 lux, that is appropriate for living. But for studies, if you are studying, if you are working for study or for work or in office areas, usually the lighting should be more than 400 lux. If you are doing any small work, precision work, like you are making some small chits or something you are making, if you are doing some precision work, it could be as high as more than 1000 lux to 2000 lux, depending on the type of the work that we are doing. So for general living, you at least you don't bump around in people, you should have 100 lux. For study or for other purposes, more than 400 lux, and then you can have as high as possible. That is the basic permissible limits for lighting in a house. Next in line, let us talk about sound levels. So first is, what are the units of sound measurement? Sound measurement can be done to check the intensity of sound, or we can have the frequency of sound. The intensity of sound is measured in decibels. So the intensity is measured in decibels, whereas the frequency is measured in hertz. And if you combine both these things, that is the decibel giving the intensity and hertz giving the frequency, this total thing is called as the phon. So what is a phon? Phon tells you about the intensity of sound, and the frequency of sound. That is what is phon. So phon, MCQ which can be asked is, what is phon? It is a psychoacoustic unit of measurement. It is a psychoacoustic unit of measurement. It is a psychoacoustic unit of measurement. That is what is phon. Next is, what are the permissible sound limits, beta? For normal hearing, it is said that the permissible sound limit should always be less than 85 decibels. This is a very frequently asked MCQ. Less than 85 decibels are what are the normal permissible limits. We all know that the range of sound that we can hear, the range of sound frequency that we can hear ranges from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. We can hear this loud frequency, but the decibels, the intensity of sound should not be more than 85 decibels. Sometimes the question may ask you, what is the permissible limits in what areas? Grossly speaking, in the residential areas, if you are staying in a very calm locality, it should be ideally less than 45 decibels, ideally. Of course, it doesn't happen in India. These guidelines are the WHO norms and they have been devised long time back. Now, this whole thing is not applicable. We do not have residential areas with less than 45 decibels. And many of us stay on the roads, there's so much noise that we have a lot of noise pollution the whole time. But ideally speaking, the residential area should be less than 45. The commercial sectors, the commercial areas are ideally less than 70 decibels. So please also note that the factories or the industries, they should always be less than 75 decibels. These are just gross criteria. In case you build a hospital, in the wards, the level of sound in the wards during night time. So in the wards, during night time, the level of sound should be less than 45 decibels. In schools, it should be less than 45. So overall, all said and done, this is what is the generally permissible limits. What is the whispering range? If I'm whispering to someone, usually if it's a very soft whisper, the whispering range is usually, depending on how loud you're whispering, so it's usually around 20 to 40 decibels. If you get single best answer, 20 to 30 is what is a soft whisper range, 20 to 30. So these are just the permissible limits. If you cross the limits, more than 85 decibels, we may start to have the auditory fatigue. We may start to have auditory fatigue more than 85 decibels. If it crosses more than 110 decibels, there are chances of temporary hearing loss. Of course, it depends, like if you are burning a cracker on Diwali. So that cracker could be like 110 decibels and it causes that thup karke sound, very loud sound it will cause, and you get that deafening of the ear. So that could be temporary hearing loss with a very acute exposure to the high intensity sound. But there could be areas where you are listening to that high intensity sound for a longer duration. That may also, even at 95 decibels or 100 decibel sounds with chronic exposure, may cause temporary hearing loss. So this is a very relative term. Next is, if it is more than 120 decibels, acute exposure may cause, again that same, it's a relative term, it may cause permanent damages, but more than 160 decibels, this has been your question beta, more than 160 decibels, it may cause rupture of tympanic membrane. So these are some of your criteria for sound and the permissible limits. This has been asked so many times that what is the upper limit for sound in India, the public health limits. It is 85 decibels, more than 160. It may cause a permanent hearing loss by rupture of tympanic membranes. Next is, what do we mean by hearing loss? Hearing loss means we can't hear. So if a person cannot hear 25 to 40 decibel sound, if the person cannot hear 25 decibel, that's fine. So I was whispering very soft and you could not hear. That's okay. So, but if I'm saying aloud at 25 to 40 decibel, still you cannot hear, that is called as a mild hearing loss. Then you raise the volume of the phone or the device where you're watching me. If it is 40 to 60 decibels, you cannot hear. Then you are in a problem. That is a moderate hearing loss. And if it is 60 to 80, that is a very bad, that is a severe hearing loss. And if it is more than 80, then we are sorry, that is a profound hearing loss and you need somebody who has at more than 80, they need treatment. So more than 80 is profound hearing loss. 25 to 40 is what we call it as a mild hearing loss. So that was all about the sound system. Now let us talk about radiations. First topic is how to measure radiation. The radiation can be measured using three fundas. The first funda, that is the radiation exposure. That is how much amount of radiation or radioactivity is there in per ml of the air. So how much radioactive elements are present per ml of air, that is what is radiation exposure. So how much radiation is there in the air, that is given by Roentgen or the Coulomb per kilogram. This is the new unit. Coulomb per kilogram is the new unit for radiation exposure. It is the amount of radioactive element present per ml of the air. In the air, how much it is. Next is the absorbed dose. That is, what is the absorbed dose? So the concept of absorbed dose is, let us say that this is 1 kilogram mass. This mass is 1 kilogram. So how much radiation, listen carefully, how much radiation is required by this 1 kilogram mass to raise the heat energy or to dissipate the heat of 1 joule? So how much energy is there? Like the amount of radiation required, it is the amount of radiation required to raise more like 1 joule of energy, 1 joule of energy from a mass of 1 kilogram. That is called as 1 gray. So 1 gray is equal to 100 rads. 100 rad was the, like rads was the old dose, old units. Now we have started using 1 gray. So gray is the newer units. Gray is the newer units. However, everything that we do in India or anywhere in the world, mostly it is, we are talking of rads. So rad is the most commonly, like most accepted unit of radiation measurement. So please note that what is radiation exposure? It is the amount of radioactivity in the air. What is radiation dose? That is the absorbed dose. That is the amount of radiation required to increase the heat by 1 joule by a mass of 1 kilogram. That is what is absorbed dose. Next is, what is this dose equivalent? Please understand, it is different from the radiation dose or the absorbed dose. So how much dose is absorbed by this thing is given by the rads. Now every tissue will behave differently with the radiation doses. If it is a more dense, it may behave differently. If there are more water, it may behave differently, whatever it is. So now dose equivalent concept comes. It is nothing but the absorbed dose into the absorbed dose multiplied with a modifying factor. What do you mean by the modifying factor? Modifying factor is nothing we take as a quality factor of any radiation. So how would you see the quality factor? The quality factor is a constant. Quality factor for X-rays, for beta rays, for gamma rays, it is constant. It is usually taken as 1. For neutron rays, which have a more detrimental effect, neutrons, it is taken as 10. And for alpha rays, which has the highest probability of causing harm to the tissue, the quality factor is taken as 20. The modifying factor is constant for all the different types of radiations, and the absorbed dose will vary. So this is going to give you a practically better understanding about what is the dose equivalent. It is measured in REMS. It is measured in REMS. However, the newer unit is a sievert. So 1 sievert is equal to 100 rem. 1 gray, which is a newer unit, 1 gray is a newer unit of the absorbed dose. So 1 gray is equal to 100 rads, and radiation exposure is measured in Roentgen, or it is in Coulomb per kilogram. Coulomb per kilogram is the newer measurement for radiation exposures. So now if you understand this, let us talk about the sources of radiation. Bache, the sources of radiation could be broadly classified into, we can have the God-made sources, the Big Bang theory, the natural sources, or we can have the man-made sources or the human-made sources, right? So what could be the natural sources, like the God-made sources? Natural sources could be the cosmic radiations. Cosmic radiations coming from outer space. We can also have from inner space, that is the atmospheric radiations, or we can also have from the land, from the rocks, terrestrial radiations, that is the terrestrial from the rocks or the land things, or from mountains. And then we can also have people throwing radiations, that is the internal radiations. Internal radiations from the people or the humans or the living things, they will also have some radiation. So cosmic rays are from outer space. Usually the cosmic rays are approximately equal to 30 millirads per year. So that is just the total range. 30 millirads per year, and that will also depend that whether you are flying in a aircraft all the time, or you are in a supersonic aircraft, or what level you are there in the world. If you are a very land person, then you will have lesser cosmic radiations. What is the terrestrial radiation? Terrestrial radiation is from the land. So various rocks are there, and in Kerala there are many mountains which will emit a lot of radiation. They have a lot of terrestrial radiation, could have any range ranging from 50 millirads to even up till 1000 millirads. So there are areas which have 1000, 1500 millirads, but usually it's in the range of 50 millirads. What is the atmospheric radiation made up of? In atmosphere, you have so many gases. You can have thoron, you can have radon, you can have ozone. You have so many radiating gases. So the radiation from the atmosphere is very less. It is only 2 to 5 millirads per year. So that is the amount of radiation we get from these things. Internal radiation is just less than 1. It is like less than 0.5 millirads a year. So humans or people or animals, we don't have a lot of radiations. So you can see the overall natural radiation is maximum up to 30 millirads. You add everything, its maximum is 50-80 millirads. So that is regarding the natural sources. Now the problem starts is about the man-made radiations. Now human-made radiations, that is a big issue. Why? Because human-made radiations could range anything from 0.5 to up till whatever number. It could range up till 5 rads, it could range up till 6 rads, whatever number. Why? Because we are sending the patient for CT scan, MRI, fluoroscopy, we'll do repeat CT scan, repeat PET scan. So many radiations are being done. So that is what is the issue about the man-made. Do you know that in a man-made radiation, in one fluoroscopy, how much radiation is expected? Usually around 3.5 to 4 rads per fluoroscopy is used. So you can't afford to have more than one fluoroscopy. Why? Because what is the upper limit? What is the upper limit or the permissible range for radiation for humans? The permissible limit is less than 5 rads a year. So we should have the range less than 5 rads. So that means technically, if you get one fluoroscopy, that's it. So the radiation dose that we wanted to have or we could have is already done. So that is about the man-made radiations, and natural is very less. They are talking in millirads. Coming over to the next types of radiation, understanding the types of radiation. Types of radiation beta can be of two types. We can have the ionizing radiation or the non-ionizing radiation. The whole game actually varies with the type of radiation. What do you mean by the type of radiation? The whole game is dependent on the wavelength. It is dependent on the wavelength of the rays. Wavelength is given by the symbol lambda. Lambda. That is what is the wavelength, right? So the whole game will depend on the wavelength. The more the wavelength, the higher the wavelength, the more is the penetrating capacity. So in ionizing radiations, we can have example is alpha rays, beta rays, gamma rays, X-rays. X-rays, please note, has the lowest wavelength. Because they have the lowest wavelength, the lowest lambda, so of course they will be least harmful. The alpha rays has the maximum wavelength, and because alpha rays has the maximum wavelength, common sense, they'll be most dangerous. They'll be most dangerous, the alpha rays. Talking of the non-ionizing type of radiations, the non-ionizing radiations could be various types like radio frequency, microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet. Ultraviolet will have the lowest wavelength. And because ultraviolet has the lowest wavelength compared to the radio frequencies, they are milder in nature. So these are the types: ionizing radiation and the non-ionizing radiation. So now if we understand all these things, what is the permissible limit? I already talked to you that what is the upper limit. Upper limit of course depends on the acute dosage also, but the upper limit is less than 5 rads per person per year. So in 1 year, we should be exposed to less than 5 rads. Rads is the absorbed dose units. So in case more than 5 rads, the body may show some subtle changes, but the changes are not evident. Only after 50 rad exposure, the changes will start. 50 to 100 rad, we will have first effect, that is the gastrointestinal effect. There could be blood cell changes, there could be hemorrhages, there could be ulcerations. That is what is GI effects. More than 150, it is problem. It is intense problem, intense symptoms, hemorrhage, capillary leak, organ damage, and death usually happens. Death is inevitable in a radiation exposure. Death usually happens in roughly around 2 to 3 weeks. The death is going to happen in more than 150 up till 1000 rads. In case it is more than 1000 rad, that's gone. So it is multiple immediate organ dysfunction. There could be immediate genetic level changes, and the death usually happen within 6 to 7 days. Within 6 to 7 days, the death is going to happen. So that's all about the radiation you would like to know. Thank you so much for watching this module.
Hi guys, please subscribe my channels.